Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. And PlayStation news today was just absolutely flowing as we have a couple big acquisitions to talk about. Yeah, Xbox tends to be the one that picks up all these different acquisitions, but PlayStation flipped the script today as they had a couple big acquisitions to announce, or at least one that's been confirmed and possibly another one that will be announced real soon. And we'll talk all about that today. Now, we do also have some Xbox Game Pass news. Well, that's not really a surprise as they continuously drop news on almost a weekly basis. But this time, they're actually adding a pretty big upgrade. And this is something that they've needed to do for a while now. And here we are. So we will talk about that one as well. With that said, though, let's just go ahead and move right into our first topic of the day, which is reviews for Disgaea 6. Now, the Disgaea franchise is an interesting one to say the least. My first Disgaea experience was on the PlayStation Vita, being Disgaea 4, and after playing that game, I had to go back and play more of these games because they're just absurd in the best possible way. It seems like this is kind of hard to do in video games, but the Disgaea franchise is genuinely a very funny franchise. They're just so over the top at just being absolutely ridiculous, and you know what? I love it in these Disgaea games, and from what it sounds like, Disgaea 6 is more of the same. Disgaea 6 is not a game that absolutely just goes out and changes the formula, but instead it does what makes the Disgaea franchise so good in the first place, and that's by having its ridiculous over-the-top humor as well as its intricate strategy RPG gameplay. And that right there is exactly where Disgaea 6 seems to excel at. Now, unfortunately, it does appear that Disgaea 6 has performance issues, and that's one of the reasons that right now Disgaea 6 sits at a 73 overall score on Metacritic. But hopefully, they get that fixed up with a future patch. However, if you can overlook the performance issues, it does seem like there's a lot to like here in Disgaea 6. Like I said before, it looks like if you do like the Disgaea franchise, you're probably more than likely going to like Disgaea 6 based off what I had heard about this game. I know the reviews are not going to dissuade me at all. I will play this game eventually. Unfortunately, I won't be able to play it right away because there's just so many games out right now, but it's definitely going to my backlog and I will play this hopefully sooner rather than later. Next up, one of the things that I love doing on this channel is highlighting some games that I think are going a little under the radar, and here we are with Grime, one of the better looking Metroidvania games that will be releasing this year, and it officially got a release date. Now, unfortunately, Grime will only be available on PC as of this moment. Hopefully, it'll come to consoles eventually, but just look at this game. It looks absolutely excellent, and it will be available to play on August 2nd. So, I mean, you're only gonna have to wait a little over a month to play this game, and like I said before, it's looking really good. It's got that Dark Souls type of feel to it and how the combat is real meticulous, and this is listed as an action RPG. Obviously, this is a Metroidvania game, but they do explain Grime as it lets you play to your preference, upgrading only those traits you feel most suited to your unique style. So I already think this game is checking all the boxes. Its gameplay looks great and similar to something like Dark Souls or Salt and Sanctuary. Then it has that moody, dark atmosphere to it, and it looks like it's going to be a good RPG game. I mean, just from top to bottom, I think that Grime looks like a promising game, and if you do want to check this game out, it will be out on August 2nd for both PC as well as Stadia out of all platforms, but again, it releases on August 2nd. Moving on, let's talk about PlayStation because they had some pretty major announcements today. Well, technically one was official while the other was kind of unofficial, but we'll get into all of that here in just a moment. But it does look like two studios have officially been acquired by PlayStation. Now, these studios have been working with PlayStation for quite a while now, so this isn't going to be a major shift in terms of what you should expect from PlayStation studios, but these are very talented studios, and it will ensure that these studios will continue to make exclusive games for PlayStation in the future, and that includes Housemarque, which has worked on hit titles such as Resogun, and here recently, Returnal. Yeah, so right away, Housemarque makes really good games, and they really specialize when it comes to arcade style of gameplay. Even Returnal, which was a big AAA style game, had that fast and frantic arcade-like gameplay, and that's one of the things that really made Returnal stand out. Now, Returnal did kind of launch to some criticism among fans for how they handled the save points in Returnal. This is a roguelike experience, and if you die, you do restart back from the beginning. But overall, Returnal is still a really good and fun game, and you can clearly see that this studio is very talented. And that's exactly why PlayStation acquired a studio like this, because not only has Housemarque made several good exclusive titles for the PlayStation brand, but they have the potential to grow even more and produce even more high-quality games. In fact, in the press release made today, they did say that Housemarque will be expanded and future titles will be bigger and more ambitious. So if you like what Housemarque brings to the table, it sounds like they're going to only get better from here on out. I mean, they've made good games in the past, so I'm definitely excited to see what they can do next, being under the same umbrella with PlayStation Studios. Interestingly enough, though, I don't think that was the most exciting announcement that was made today, and that was actually because it looks like PlayStation Japan might have accidentally leaked out yet another acquisition. Yeah, okay, so this is what happened. The PlayStation Japan account over on Twitter announced that PlayStation was acquiring Housemarque, but instead of having the Housemarque logo like all the other announcements were making, instead, it showed Bluepoint. Yeah, that may have been a premature mistake, as the Japanese Twitter account did take this tweet down. But it's kind of already out there now, and fans are really going to be talking about this because it looks like PlayStation is in fact acquiring Bluepoint. Now, we can kind of pass this off as a simple mistake, but I just don't see why they would have a picture like this at all if it wasn't true. I mean, even if you look at this marketing picture that they post of them acquiring Bluepoint, it does have Demon Souls in the background, whereas the Housemarque picture does not show Demon Souls in the background. So I do think that this is happening and that PlayStation is just kind of spacing out these announcements to give each acquisition the proper amount of buzz and respect. But now, this is just me. I will say that I am personally more excited in the Bluepoint Games acquisition than I am in Housemarque. Now, Housemarque is a very talented studio, and I do expect them to continue to make great games. But I think Bluepoint Games in specific has a ton of potential in not only making more great remakes, but also making completely original games. I'll get into that a little bit more here in a second, but yes, Bluepoint Games have become experts at remaking games, and debatably, they might be the best at that right now in the entire industry. I mean, if you go back and look at Shadow of the Colossus for the PS4, that game looks outstanding visually. And then you have Demon Souls for the PlayStation 5, and that game still is my favorite game that's released for the PlayStation 5 so far. I absolutely loved that game. And these games don't only visually look really good, but they also play and feel really good as well. I really do believe that Bluepoint Games is one of the best, if not the very best studio at remaking games right now. Now, there is a rumor that they might be working on a Metal Gear Solid remake. I don't know if that's true, but if PlayStation does acquire a studio like this and then they are working on a Metal Gear Solid remake, that would be huge on its own. But with that said, I really am interested in seeing what Bluepoint Games does next. I mean, if PlayStation really did acquire Bluepoint Games, they could open up their entire catalog and just let Bluepoint Games run wild with all kinds of different remakes. I mean, people have been wanting a Legends of Dragoon remake for years and years, and Bluepoint Games could possibly be a studio that does something like that. I really like the idea of having a remake studio as a first-party studio. This is something I think Xbox should do as well, but that's a whole different story. Regardless, though, it does look like PlayStation picked up a really good remake studio, but I think Bluepoint Games in specific could be so much more than just that. See, and that's where things get really interesting, because Bluepoint Games has publicly displayed interest in doing their own original IP as well. Now, we've seen what Bluepoint Games can do graphically. I mean, Demon Souls and Shadow of the Colossus looks absolutely amazing in terms of their visuals, but I'd be really interested to see what they can do with their own original IP, and with PlayStation's funding, they could get a chance to do just that. Now, we'll see what happens with all that and everything, but I actually am really excited about this Bluepoint Games acquisition. We could see something really special with the two this generation if all of this pans out. Something else that Bluepoint could end up doing, and I'm just going to kind of float this out there, is that they could do some sequels for some dormant IP. You know, maybe a Jak 4 or a new Sly Cooper or something like that. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but hey, you never know. What I will say for myself, though, is that I'm really excited to see what Bluepoint Games and Housemarque does next under the PlayStation umbrella. Now, that isn't quite everything on the PlayStation front, because we do have one last topic to talk about for PlayStation, and that's a Ghost of Tsushima's Director Cut. Yeah, so apparently Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut for the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 was rated by the Electronic Software Ratings Board. And like we've talked about on this channel several times, oftentimes when you see a rating like this go up online, more often than not, that means that this is an actual thing. Now, sometimes it doesn't pan out that way, but in this case, I do suspect that a Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut is on its way. And I mean, if you like Ghost of Tsushima last year, which it seems like most people did, then you're really going to like this Director's Cut, because it more than likely will have extra content. There has been some ongoing rumors here recently that Ghost of Tsushima will get some kind of DLC, and with this Director's Cut suddenly popping up on the ratings board, yeah, this more than likely will be some kind of expansion with some extra content. Now, that's where things get even more interesting, because there was a recent domain name registered for Ghost of Ikishima. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but Ikishima is an island that is located southeast of Tsushima and was also hit hard in the Mongol invasions during the 13th century. So I think that kind of gives you a hint as to what this expansion could possibly be. But either way, if you like Ghost of Tsushima, it looks like you're going to get more Ghost of Tsushima here soon. Moving on, let's talk about Xbox Game Pass, as they once again have expanded even further, and they also announced a pretty big upgrade. Now, we'll first kind of focus on that big upgrade, because it looks like xCloud games will now be powered by new custom Xbox Series X hardware. Now, if you previously tried to stream games to your phone, you're actually running on Xbox One S consoles. But now they've officially upgraded that to the Xbox Series X hardware, which means that you're going to get faster load times, less latency, and you're also going to see higher resolution while streaming. So that right there is a very welcome addition if you do like to stream games to your phone. Now, I can say for myself, I have actually used Xbox game streaming in the past using my phone with a Razer Kishi controller, and you know what? It actually runs pretty well. Now, I'm not saying that it's as good as local hardware or anything like that, but from my own personal experience, Xbox game streaming does work relatively okay if you have the right connection. Do keep in mind that you absolutely do need a 5 GHz router to make this function properly, but if you do have the right internet speed and you have the right router, then you absolutely can have a good experience streaming your games to your phone. And if you are going to do this, I do recommend having a good controller setup as well. I personally use the Razer Kishi, which is absolutely excellent. I would highly recommend that. But now that you can actually play these games using the Xbox Series X hardware, that is a pretty significant upgrade. I will be really interested to see how much of an upgrade this actually is, and if I can tell a big difference using my phone. I have been playing through the Wild at Heart recently, so that might be the perfect game to check this out on and see if it does have better load times and, you know, if it just runs better in terms of latency. But yeah, this is a great addition to Xbox Game Pass, and it gets even better because not only are they upgrading their xCloud games by using an Xbox Series X, but they're also expanding from Android over to iOS devices as well as PC via the web for anyone in 22 different countries with an Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription. So there you have it. Xbox Game Pass is not only upgraded, but it has expanded as well. And if you do have an Apple device or PC, you can now stream your Xbox Game Pass games to these devices. And this is something that I think is really smart on Xbox's part. For us hardcore gamers, a service like this is not going to replace our console games, but it's a nice addition if you're away from your console. But then at the same time, it has the potential to really reach a whole new market. Not everybody has an Xbox Series out there, but with Xbox Game Pass being so widely available, it could really bring in a whole new crowd of gamers. And that's why I think this push for game streaming is a very smart move from Xbox. If anything though, this at the very least just offers even more choice to play Xbox Game Pass games, and I am always okay with more choices. And you know what, while we're talking about Xbox Game Pass, let's go ahead and take a look at the poll of the day, where I asked you all, what is your favorite thing about Xbox Game Pass? And I know that's a very hard choice to make because there's just so many great things about Xbox Game Pass, but I wanted to see what y'all's absolute favorite was, and here it came down to really two options: discovering new games and then day one releases. 50% of you chose discovering new games, while 41% chose day one releases. And yeah, it's the same for me as well. And like I said yesterday, Xbox Game Pass has just introduced me to so many new games that I may have missed otherwise. Games like The Wild at Heart, The Outer Wilds, and Ashen, I discovered because of Xbox Game Pass, and I'm really grateful for that. I really enjoyed these games, and it seems to be a pretty common thing for me to discover just yet another game that, again, I may not have played if it wasn't for Xbox Game Pass. So that is also probably my favorite thing about Xbox Game Pass, but you know, it's really closely followed by day one releases. I mean, the amount of money that Xbox Game Pass has saved me has been just absolutely absurd. I mean, just the fact that every Xbox first-party game comes to Xbox Game Pass day one is just absolutely crazy. But they also get third-party games as well. I mean, Outriders from Square Enix, as an example, somehow managed to release day one into Xbox Game Pass, and that is crazy that even happened. But it seems like they do have a couple new day one releases pretty much every month, whether that be some new first-party game or a surprise third-party game. It just happens over and over again. But you all also mentioned some interesting things in the comments that I didn't personally think about, and one of those was that Xbox Game Pass really helps out with multiplayer games. Now, I already knew that Xbox Game Pass automatically gave these multiplayer games a big user base, and that's big for the multiplayer game. But interestingly enough, some of you all pointed out that it allows you to automatically be able to play with your friends because you don't have to convince them to buy a game. Instead, if you and your friends all own Xbox Game Pass, well, you can just kind of jump in together without anybody having to worry about spending any extra money on a game that they may or may not like. So I didn't really think about that before, but that's another bonus to having Xbox Game Pass. And that right there is the thing. Xbox Game Pass is just so good in a number of different ways, and honestly, it's almost unbelievable how good this service actually is sometimes. Anyways though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.